Hello and welcome back to the Football Discussion Podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about quarterbacks around the NFL, teams who have uncertainty around their quarterbacks, and what the offseason might look like for those teams. Quarterback's always an interesting discussion to get into because it is the most difficult position in all of professional sports. If you don't believe me, just listen here.
Let's go scatter to west, right, tight, F left. 372 Y stick, Z spot.
Here we go. Scattered to west, right, tight, F left, 382 Y stick, Z.
Christ. Just go scatter to west, right, tight, F left. 372 Y stick, Z spot.
Here we go. Scattered. Say it again.
That is a classic from Tampa Bay Buccaneers training camp years ago with John Gruden as the head coach. Chris Sims trying to get out the play call. So yes, quarterback definitely is the most difficult position for a number of reasons. Today's discussion, we're going to talk about Tom Brady and Dak Prescott, where their futures might lead them, if Jameis Winston's worth keeping around in Tampa Bay, if the Colts are going to be finding a quarterback, what the Jaguars are going to do with Nick Foles' contract, and much more. Alright, so first quarterback up, Tom Brady. Offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels, no head coaching jobs. He'll be back. It's still a win-now team, and his value is highest in New England. I think he's definitely going to be back. He says he wants to get paid. New England says they're willing to pay him. Doesn't really seem like much of a no-brainer. So I think anybody can crush any of the Andy Dalton rumors that they're going to maybe try and trade up for a quarterback. They don't really have the draft ammunition to trade up in the first round for a quarterback. So expect Brady to be back in New England. Maybe a late round quarterback. They've done that the last couple of years, taking out flyers on some guys that would be considered projects, not really immediate starters, but guys maybe down the road that can blossom into a starting quarterback. But right now, Tom Brady back in New England. No doubt in my mind about it. Next up, we have Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott. What the offseason is looking like for him. Reportedly not around the Cowboys facility. Long-term deal has not been able to get done. What should we expect from Dak? I think somewhere in the range of $30 to $35 million is going to be his asking price, probably closer to 35. Is he worth it? I think that probably not. He's probably not worth $35 million, but that is also just the going rate of a quarterback that's probably a top 15 quarterback. Quarterbacks always kind of tend to be overpaid. You can obviously point to somebody like Kirk Cousins getting over $70 million guaranteed in Minnesota. Not that he's not a good quarterback, but to find a quarterback that's a worthy starter in the NFL, you're going to have to shell out, 15, 20, almost 25% of your salary cap to get one in the building. I think Dak definitely had a strong year, definitely an up and down year, really kind of lived and died with Dak, the Cowboys did, but when he performs well, he's definitely capable of being a top 10 quarterback, even can slowly sneak his way maybe closer to top 5 discussion on his best days. The problem is, like we saw in the late season Eagles game, he was outperformed by Carson Wentz, who had a worse offensive line, worse wide receivers, worse running backs, and the Cowboys still weren't able to win that game, ultimately cost them a chance to get into the playoffs despite all the talent on the roster. So there are definitely some knocks on Dak. He's not perfect. He's not extremely consistent, but I do think that where he belongs is in Dallas. He's a strong quarterback. Eventually they'll get a deal done, but right now it's looking like he's going to have to play on the franchise tag, which does work out to be about $27 million a year, which isn't as much as he probably would expect to be getting on the long-term deal. But in my personal opinion, if I'm Dak Prescott, I hold out. I don't show up until I get my long-term contract. I don't want to play under the tag, even though people might call him selfish and a bunch of other things for not playing for $27 million. I think right now he has a lot of leverage. This is the time to use it. He's coming off a strong year. There's a coaching change. Mike McCarthy, he's going to want Dak Prescott in the building. So I think the Cowboys are going to be very motivated to get this deal done. And if I'm Dak Prescott, there's no chance in hell I'm going to do my job for less money than I could be getting or that I probably should be getting after the last couple of years, especially this last year. Okay, next up we have Panthers quarterback Cam Newton. Where does the future lie with him? He's had trouble staying healthy the last few years. They're making a change at head coach, so really up in the air with him. A lot of people speculating, is he going to be in Carolina? Is he going to be playing somewhere else? Is he worth what it would take to get your hands on him? Was he worth the contract he's on? Right now, I think it's pretty sad to see, but I think Cam's career kind of is getting ready to shrivel up and die, as sad as it is to say, because he is definitely one of the most exciting players of his time, and just, so much God-given talent. MVP, took a team to a Super Bowl at one point, but really we're closer to the end than we are the beginning for Cam Newton. And every year that passes, we're another year removed from that Super Bowl and MVP year that everybody kind of likes to talk about him and fall in love with his potential and what he has done. But it's more of a what have you done for me lately and what can you do for me in the future that's going to make you worthwhile to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. The Panthers do have two other quarterbacks on the roster, Kyle Allen and Will Grier. Both guys really kind of failed to impress last year and really run with the job and prove that they can be trusted to be the quarterback going forward. So Carolina really up in the air as far as a quarterback goes. They're still going to want to fill seats in that stadium, so maybe Cam Newton coming back wouldn't be the worst idea for the Panthers right now. I think he could be used as a bridge quarterback, which isn't a concept I necessarily agree with. I think the sooner you get off a quarterback, the better off you are. You see too many teams hang on to their quarterbacks for too long. You think of Jay Cutler in Chicago, Ryan Fitzpatrick in Buffalo. You think of Eli Manning with the New York Giants taking forever to really cut ties with him. Joe Flacco in Baltimore. These teams, they get these quarterbacks and they're so scared to move on from them. They're so scared of being wrong that they ultimately are just wrong by hanging on to them in the first place. It's time to move on, find a new guy, and if it's not the next guy, you pick up and you start over and see if it's the next guy. And I think that's where Carolina is. They're probably at least a few years removed from being competitive in the NFL right now. So with the 7th overall pick, they're probably looking at Justin Herbert because Cincinnati obviously going to be taking Burrow at 1. Miami already has 3 first-round picks, including the 5th overall pick, so it looks like Tua is going to end up in Miami. Doesn't really look like Carolina's going to have enough ammo to jump them to get anyone else. It looks like at number 7, if they go quarterback, it's going to be Herbert. I don't think this will be a bad move at all. I think that the days of Cam being, an MVP or, a superstar, top-end starting quarterback, those days are kind of gone. Unfortunately, he's had a really great run in the NFL, and this was something that I talked about when he went to the Super Bowl and lost and had, a terrible performance, and everyone was kind of ripping on him, but also at the same time saying, well, he's young, he'll be back. He just won the MVP. I mean, this is only the start for Cam Newton. And I looked at the career of Donovan McNabb, and that might be a little bit odd parallel for a lot of people, but people said a lot of the same things about McNabb when he went to the Super Bowl with the Eagles and Andy Reid and lost to Tom Brady's Patriots. Everybody said, well, he's young, they've won so many games, they have such a good core, they'll be back, there's nothing to worry about, this is just the start for him. And it ultimately was kind of the beginning of the end for McNabb. And it seems that it's kind of similar that's what's happening with Cam Newton. Really, since that MVP season, he's really struggled, hasn't been able to stay healthy. Maybe his play probably hasn't dropped astronomically. He's still very capable, but the best ability is availability. You can't win games if you're on the sidelines. And that's kind of where he's spent most of his time. So I think the time's kind of passed him by. He probably does have a couple of quality years. I don't think that Carolina has a team right now that's built to win, so I think they're better picking up, starting over, starting fresh. They've got a new head coach. Time to move on from Cam Newton. Do I think they will? No. I think he will be back, but I think they'd be better off moving on from him because he's clearly not the answer. They're not winning right now. 2-3 years down the road maybe, but 2-3 years down the road, I doubt Cam Newton is going to still be healthy enough and have the ability to win you games. Next up, Chicago Bears and Mitchell Trubisky. Boy, Bears fans, it must just pain you to watch Patrick Mahomes be everything that Mitch Trubisky isn't. Like, good, like a winner, like fun to watch, interesting, a winner, and a winner. So, Mitch Trubisky clearly not working out in Chicago. Will he be back? Yes, he'll be back. Like I said earlier, teams always move off quarterbacks too late. They'll give him another shot. They'll run it back. And they really can't do it. Their hands are tied. They don't even have a first-round pick because of the Khalil Mack trade, which everyone killed the Raiders for making in the first place. And it's starting to look like the Raiders are actually winning that trade, but different topic for a different day. I think the Bears are in really rough shape right now at the quarterback position. Trubisky's not the answer. They don't have the first-round pick to move up and get anyone. So they're kind of stuck right now. They don't have a whole lot of options. Cam Newton was discussed as being a potential fit there because he's a little bit better for a win-now type quarterback than Trubisky would be. and the Bears do have a strong roster, one that can compete, one that did compete the year before. So Trubisky, he's probably going to be the starter for Chicago, and he's probably going to be what he's always been, which is a mediocre, really not a top 20 or 25 starting quarterback in the NFL. He's really a low tier guy. So Chicago Bears fans, you have to look forward to a phenomenal defense and an incompetent quarterback all 2020 long. Please enjoy. Next up, we have Los Angeles Chargers and Phillip Rivers. I won't spend a lot of time on this one because I personally feel that this one's pretty cut and dry. You look at his season last year, he sucked. He looks old. He looked like he doesn't have it anymore, and he just picked up and moved to Florida. What part of this says that he's going to be playing for Los Angeles next year? There's no chance that they're going to be bringing him back. He's not going to really be worth it. Right now, the Chargers hold the 6th pick, which is one behind Miami. Miami already has the 3 first-round picks, like I discussed earlier, so it doesn't look like the Chargers are going to be able to leapfrog them and get their hands on Tua. So if they do go quarterback, they'd be looking at a Justin Herbert, unless somebody else trades into the top 5 somewhere, like a later round team that's looking for a quarterback. So the Chargers, will they go quarterback? Who knows? Nobody has really been able to decipher what they're going to be able to do. The one thing we do know is it does not look like Phillip Rivers will be their quarterback. They're completely up in the air. If I had to guess, I think they're drafting a quarterback at 6, and I think it'll be Herbert, and I think it'll be a reach. Not a big Herbert guy, but quarterbacks and draft picks all together, are really just completely random. They're really tough to predict. I mean, what people were saying about all these different quarterbacks coming out, most people are wrong, and then the one time they're right, they want to pretend that they have all these magic answers, and that's just not realistic. So as far as the Chargers, we'll see what they do. A little up in the air. Likely looking at taking a quarterback in the first round, in my opinion. Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Jameis Winston. I couldn't wait to talk about this one, because if you look at the fact that he threw for 5,000 yards, and you let this convince you that he's a starting quarterback, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do, because he threw 30 interceptions. What do you expect? 30 interceptions, you don't just wash that away. That's not just a bad year. That's 15 interceptions. You can dwindle that down to 10, maybe even get it down to 8. That's real. 30 interceptions, you're going to throw probably 25 the next year. Are you going to win with a quarterback with 25 interceptions? Come on. Jameis Winston, don't convince yourself he can change. No, the interceptions, those are so you just stop throwing. No, if you're an interceptions guy, you're an interceptions guy. If you throw 30 of them last year, there's no reason to think that you might not throw 35 the next year. So stop with the Jameis Winston, he threw for 30-plus touchdowns at 5,000 yards. Only so many guys have ever done that. I don't care. I can't win if you're giving the other team an extra 30 possessions a year. Are you kidding me? That's almost 2 possessions a game. Jameis is just a guy who has judgment issues, from everything in his personal life to everything he does on the field. I mean, how many times did he hit a linebacker square in the chest? This all being said, he will be the quarterback for Tampa Bay next year. There's no doubt. He did, as much as it pains me to say, he did show enough flashes of good to warrant bringing him back. So I can't jump off board with Tampa Bay at least kicking the tires on it, mostly because they don't have many other options. They're not really a very attractive spot for a team right now. I don't see really a long list of quarterbacks on their shopping list that are really going to be any better than Jameis Winston, or cheaper, an option like a Tom Brady or Phillip Rivers. If they wanted to kick the tires on that would be pretty expensive. They're not a win-now team, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. So Jameis Winston, he will be in a Tampa Bay Bucs jersey next year, throwing plenty of interceptions, likely on the first drive, while also throwing for 400 yards. Mike Evans will be making incredible catches. The offense will be exciting. We will all be watching. They will be on ESPN Top 10, as well as ESPN Not Top 10, all season long. A couple more teams I want to touch on before we get out of here. The Jacksonville Jaguars and the Indianapolis Colts. We'll go ahead and start with the Colts and Jacoby Brissett. The thing about Jacoby Brissett is that we really don't know anything about him quite yet. We haven't really made up our minds if he's good or if he's bad, because he shows us flashes of both within the same game, or maybe even within the same play. So the only thing that we do know is that we don't know. Can you win with Jacoby Brissett? Absolutely. Can you lose because of him? Yes. I think he's a cheap option right now. You know, they did extend him at the beginning of last season after the Andrew Luck retirement. So they are definitely tied to him, but he's not super expensive. He's actually a decent value for what he brings to the table. Um, I definitely don't see the Colts making a quarterback move this offseason. I think this will be a big season for Jacoby Brissett to prove what he's worth, to prove if he's, you know, a guy that they're going to keep around and keep developing and put their trust into and their resources into, or if he has a down year, they really don't like what they see. They see the team being a little bit further away from competing than they had originally thought when they had all these draft picks, all this money, and Andrew Luck was still playing football. And if that's the case, they'll probably do a full rehaul at the quarterback position. The problem with them that I see is that they're kind of in quarterback purgatory where they're not bad enough that they're going to get a high pick and luck into a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, but they're also not good enough that they're really going to be making the playoffs quite yet. So this offseason, probably not going to be making a quarterback move. Next offseason, we'll see. That'll largely obviously depend on Brissett's performance. If I had to put a guess to it, I think Brissett's going to come out, and I think he's going to have a good year. I think they got a lot of pieces around him. They have a good team. I think they'll be able to win some games, probably somewhere in the 6-10 to maybe 9-7 range. Probably a fringe playoff team that won't quite get in. I think Brissett, he'll stick around for a couple more years in Indianapolis, partially because of the contract he has already set up with them, and eventually they'll have to move off him, but we're probably a couple years away from that. And lastly, the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that is in such great shape that they are losing 2 of their home games to go play in London next year. So good for all the Jacksonville Jaguars fans in London. All jokes aside, they have a quarterback controversy, if you will call it that, between Nick Foles with the big contract and Gardner Minshew, who was up and down last year, but ultimately probably outperformed Nick Foles. With all the money that's on Nick Foles' contract, it's tough to justify keeping him on the bench. If you're paying a guy that much money, you might as well have him in there to show you sooner rather than later whether he's worthwhile, or if you need to just cut ties, cut and run, go find someone else, pick it up and destroy it all, start over because you realize you got it wrong and it's time to move on. This all being said, I'm really not ready to give up on Foles. I'm not just holding on to that magical Super Bowl run that he had at one point. I do think that it takes a little bit of time to get into a system and learn it, get comfortable to really be successful. I'll point to Ryan Tannehill, kind of up and down, mediocre in Miami, gets this Tennessee, right players around him, right system, good coaching, and really starts to take over the position and really has his best year. I don't think there's any reason that Foles couldn't do something similar in Jacksonville once he gets his feet wet, once he gets used to the team, the coaching, the play calling. I think these types of things, they take time, so I don't think we need to just throw Foles out the door and declare it a bad contract quite yet. But if he does come out and he's struggling, say 5-6 games in the year, probably he's done. He's probably never going to have another starting job in the league again. Probably just be a backup or retire at that point, since he already talked about retiring before. But in terms of this offseason, I don't see them making a quarterback move. I think the only problem worse than having 2 quarterbacks is having 3 quarterbacks and not knowing which one to play. So I think right now they're not in terrible shape at the quarterback position. They just don't have a definite answer quite yet. All right, and before we get out of here, 2 points I just want to hit on real quick. A couple of dark horses that might be in the quarterback market, whether it be this year or next year. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger coming off of serious arm issues, and on top of that, he's also very old. There's a lot of money on his contract, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers make a late-round pick for a quarterback, or if next offseason they do a complete overhaul at the position if Ben were to retire or to have a bad year and they move off of him. Another team is the Vikings. Kirk Cousins, even with all the guaranteed money on his contract, how much they've invested into him, if he comes out and he shits the bed, say 5-6 games into the year, I think next offseason that's definitely something we can look at, that the Vikings are going to do a full overhaul. It's too far away for both of those teams to really speculate. I just think it's something that's worth keeping an eye on, that maybe they plant the seeds with things they do this offseason to set up for what that might mean for the quarterback position next offseason. So there you have it, the Football Discussion Podcast outlook on this offseason's quarterbacks, the quarterback needy teams, and what we can expect going forward. As always, thank you for listening. I'm your host, Colby Cummings.